All these images were produced on one of their most powerful workstations, the funkily named Onyx RealityEngine2.
And today, at great expense, it's here in the Bad Influence studio. If you want one of these for Christmas, it will cost you a cool £250,000. So I better not spill any yoghurt on it. It produces images 4 times the quality of your normal TV picture, so I'm seeing much crisper pictures than you are. And astonishingly, all these images are happening in real time. The computer's having to do millions of calculations a second to work out what each part of the picture should look like as we move round it. We can zoom in and out, we can spin it to the left and to the right. It's calculating the way the light is reflected, how the shadows fall. In fact, the calculating power of the RealityEngine2 is 200 times that of a PC. And it can produce pictures like this so quickly because it uses a technique called texture mapping. That's a phrase you've heard on the programme before, but I'm going to try and explain what texture mapping is now. But to do that, we've just got to get rid of our space station. And a fella you might recognise, Ludwig van Beethoven, albeit a fairly basic model of him. There's a bit of shading on there, but not much else. What he needs is a bit of texture mapping, and the texture we're going to map onto him is that one, brick. The computer doesn't need much more information than that tiny portion of it because it can just reproduce it as many times as is necessary. So we'll ask it to map that texture onto Beethoven. And there he is, Ludwig van Beethoven, texture mapped with brick. What the computer's done is taken the texture, which was the brick, and mapped it onto the model of Beethoven. Effectively, he's wrapped it round like you would wrap a present for Christmas. And you can still move it around in real time. You can spin it and turn it upside down and see all the angles and all the shadows. You can do some cool tricks with this equipment as well, though. What we've done now is mapped a shiny surface onto Beethoven, and the computer's showing us what that would look like if it was put in front of a photograph of some flowers. It's calculating all the reflections as it rotates. It'll do the same as I move it up and down, or spin it. And you can use other photos too. See if you recognise these two. This time, Ludwig van Beethoven is in front of a photograph of the young and dashing presenting team of Bad Influence. Although which of us is young and which is dashing, I'll leave you to sort out for yourself. If we turn Beethoven round and zoom in and in and in and go through the base of the bust, we can go right inside, and then the reflections start to get really weird. There are other things you can do with photographs and texture mapping as well. I scanned in a photograph of Violet earlier on, and watch, I can make it look like I've dropped a pebble into the pond, create a ripple effect, or better than that, I can stretch her nose, make her fingers longer, or even rotate her hair. And to show you how texture mapping helps me do this, I'll just have to call up another photograph. Underneath this photograph is a grid, and there was the same grid underneath Violet's photograph. And if you want to distort the image, the computer calculates how the grid would be distorted, and each point on the photograph corresponds to a point on the grid. So all the computer has to do to figure out distortion is distort the grid and then just texture map the photograph over the distortion. It really is a very simple but very effective technique. You can also use texture mapping to create virtual worlds. All the images in this virtual town have been created by texture mapping. I should be on the right, it's America. Hang a left and make for that tree. Even the trees have been created by texture mapping. Look, if I turn the texture mapping off, you can see it's just a block or a two-dimensional billboard. And what the texture mapping does is put a photograph of the tree onto that block. And where there isn't a tree, it makes the block invisible. It really is very clever. It just maps it on in the same way as it mapped the brick and the shiny surfaces onto Beethoven. And the same applies to all the buildings. Look, without the texture mapping, they're just blocks. With the texture mapping, the detail is quite incredible. There's also a virtual lorry that drives around the village, and you can look at it from different viewpoints. From here, which peculiarly is the front axle, or from outside the lorry like that, or from way up in the sky. Remember I told you the trees were texture mapped onto two-dimensional blocks? See how, as it passes the lorry, the billboard turns. If your point of view was in the lorry, that would just look like a tree all the way around. But from the air, you can see how the computer fools you. This kit costs £250,000, so obviously it does have some serious aspects too. Architects can produce very accurate walkthroughs of buildings that prospective customers can walk around and explore at will. This is a real building. It's the University of California in America. Designers can try out their ideas, see where they want the doors and windows to be, see if the whole building works as a whole. And my favourite demo as a bit of a sailor is this one, a harbour simulator for training boat captains. And now for some more games reviews.